And the miners that do live there get paid very well. So for them to speak out against what's happening, for them to talk out against mountaintop removal, and there's a bunch of people in line, it's a lot of incentive for them not to say anything, because if they speak up, easily they could be told, get out.
Yeah, I was gonna ask this before, because I watched the video online the other day about some protesters that went to it was an Army Corps of Engineer meeting that was supposed to change the process of rubber stamping permits, and it was pretty obvious that the coal companies got, got coal workers there in this town to come and be against the Army Corps of Engineers, and they totally packed the place, and they outside they had protesters who were protesting mountaintop removal. They had them cornered, and it's pitting people. And I was wondering how you guys, because you guys went to Appalachia, what the input was, if you got input from coal workers as to the problem of it, because that's their first thing, and of course what their bosses tell them is that if these people who are against destroying the environment get their way, they will lose their jobs. Right. And like you said, they pay them real good money, so that these people, they do not want their livelihood threatened, even if it means destroying the environment. Right. But just wondering if you had any input from it.
Well, and these folks who are working these jobs are in these amazingly difficult positions, because they're being paid. I mean, they are destroying the land that they love so that they can continue to pay their rent and their bills, so that they can continue to live there. What a mind fuck is that, huh? And just like you say, the coal companies are telling us the environmentalists are trying to take away your jobs, when if you think about it for just a minute, you realize that actually the coal companies already took away most of the jobs. And so it's just like another example of this, really devious divide and conquer type of stuff. It's very hard for people to make decisions about that, because coal is so powerful there that it's people constantly feel like they have an axe down their leg.
It's like lumbering in the Northwest and that kind of thing too, because they got the people there, and they're also mechanizing that, where they just have a machine come up, grab a tree, and chop it, so that they're taking away lumbermen, these lumberjacks' jobs away from them. But those lumberjacks that are left are still wanting to fight for their jobs for these lumber companies. But like you said, the lumber companies are taking their jobs away.
I wanted to ask another question along those lines too, because we were just talking about. Because that was my understanding of the history too, that the labor movement played a large part as far as the unions. That's how Jimmy Hoffa got famous himself. But I wanted to know, did y'all, from what I understand what y'all trying to do, were you able to document the history of the co-opting of the union structural power? The power. In other words, now union heads, they political, so they tell the employees where to go. You get the money, you be in the union. Now instead of the union working for the, for the workers, like you were showing the strength before, now the unions have really been co-opted. But does that have a history to bring us up to date?
Well, we don't actually go real deep into that, but one interesting thing about the United Mine Workers of America specifically is that there are now more truck drivers and more secretaries in the UMWA than there are coal miners. Which is real interesting way of seeing the change of what used to be one of the strongest unions in this entire country has turned into something, just a shadow of itself.
The way that you view your project, the mural, or how are you calling it again?
Graphic.
Graphic. Okay.
Call it whatever you want. We don't know what it's thing over here.
It seems like obviously there's this problem of language, and that if this message were articulated in the correct way, obviously you would think that you know, whatever the political factions, it goes back to that idea of polarization and invective and polemics, and just how it just perpetuates this cycle. And that even now, language, when you hear people talk about, well, we need a portfolio of energy sources, and you know, that becomes this buzz phrase, and it gets repeated. And right now we're having problems with coal in Lake Erie. We've got a huge mercury problem, but it's very difficult to articulate. And then, of course, then they'll talk also about, we got 2 nuclear plants, we've got Davis-Besse, and we've got Enrico Fermi. And so any kind of alternative or any kind of a deeper understanding just gets immediately swamped by this invective, this polemics, this. I mean, it just seems like this is a very skillful way, perhaps, to try to articulate. And just in the way you did, I'm really impressed with what you did in that little town in Maine. And that there'd be this way to get the message out there, to kind of saturate, like even in a place like Kentucky, and realize that no, this is not a Fox News kind of forum or CNN. There's really some issues here that we need to slow down and look at, and it's not, you know, left versus right. I mean, I'm really impressed with what y'all are doing, and this mechanism, this way to get through the language, you know.
So for a lot of us in the collective, our inspiration for doing this work is, so this strategy, a war strategy where you don't attack your enemy right straight on, you come at him from the side. Amen. Right? That's just like basics, right? So for us, like being able to come at things visually and on all these and metaphorically and all these other levels, that we, like, our bones know how to tell stories and how to appreciate and understand oral history and hearsay, and this super legitimizes a very old way of talking about stories. Hallelujah. And so in that way it's very infectious and takes on a life of its own, and it can talk about what the right answer is in a way that's not about what's correct or what one person thinks or some arrogant like activist who's coming at you and telling you blah 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 through some speech or a radio program or book that's all about hitting people over the head with words. We're like using this other strategy to get people by their hearts and get people, trick them by being able to pay attention to cartoons and stories, and so in that way we're like trying to hone that strategy and figure out how this can function. And so for real, like what you're talking about is that's why a bunch of us are addicted to doing this, is because it feels really good to be able to go talk to a whole bunch of people or know that these posters are functioning out there in the world in a way that we're telling people the truth. We're telling people really hard shit that none of us want to think about it, and we're doing it in a way that at its best people are saying is inspiring, and it's like sugar coating the truth in a way that people want to digest it and want to be able to sit with it and connect their heart to it, where a lot of the mediums that we've been using as activists for a while, they're just so heavy-handed, it really turns people off. And so that's where we're at with it.
Right. So up here at the top of chapter 3, we have a sequence that shows where the coal is going. And over here on the left, we have this big power plant that looks like a train engine, pulling in a train of factories and reaching out with all of these arms, one of which is connected to the continuous miner machine here. Others are sucking up water and gobbling up the land. So in the United States, now, a lot of people, even some of the bees, thought that that coal disappeared with the steam engine, that it was obsolete. But today, 50% of our electricity comes from coal. Coal is used to make most steel, and it's also used in the manufacture of concrete. So let's think about this. When we consider the infrastructure of our industrial economy, where do we see electricity, steel, and concrete?
Everywhere!
It's everything, right? It's all of our manufacturing systems, all of our transportation systems, even a lot of the places where we live and work and play are built up out of all of this stuff. So, and even if you live in an area where when you flip the light switch on, you're not consuming coal. The vast majority of manufacturing is done with coal. Does anyone know any stats about the amount of coal, the percentage of coal here in Ohio? Folks in Indiana told us it was 96%. I bet in Ohio it's similar. I would think.
Two coal trains go through Toledo every day.
Yeah, right.
We were here a few weeks ago. It was at 60%.
And then
60%.
Bloxwell.